I think you can make a very strong argument that for 2 consecutive seasons, the Eagles are in the conversation, certainly, and they might be the winner of the worst wide receiving corps in the entire NFL.
You're listening to the JAKIB Media Sports Network in partnership with AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. Subscribe to the JAKIB Media channel on YouTube for access to all daily sports content.
All right, welcome back. Friday edition of The Fix. We're live inside the Prop Swap Studios, 1490 Sports Betting Radio, 7:30. That means John McMullen. John joins me every night at 7:30 to talk Eagles and all the latest in the NFL. Follow John on Twitter at JFMcMullen, PhillyVoice.com, SI.com, and host of Extending the Play, which you can hear every Saturday, tomorrow, 10 a.m. to 11. John, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. How are you, Ryan?
Doing well, man. Doing well. Friday. Can't complain. And, going to talk some Eagles, man, so let's get into it. And we're taking a step away from the quarterback tonight, and we're going to dive into the wide receiver position because here's my thoughts, John. This team has not had a viable wide receiver since Terrell Owens. Like, listen, Alshon in the Super Bowl year played well, made some big plays. He was a nice addition for a season and a half. But you look at the last time this team even developed a wide receiver from their rookie year onward, then you have to go further back from T.O. So all the focus is on quarterback, but what the heck are the Eagles going to do at wideout?
Well, number one, I think the position as a whole is one of the reasons the old coaching staff is no longer here from a larger standpoint, because Aaron Moorhead, the actual wide receivers coach, will be back, and that's the first wide receivers coach you're going to have for 2 consecutive years since the Chip Kelly era and Bob McNell. So that's how long it's been. It was just a revolving door at that position, coach, and really the only success was Mike Groh, who got promoted, and that's the only reason he moved. He would have stayed at the position. So you could argue that he was a success. Other than that, it's been an issue, and it's been an issue from a developmental standpoint. The Eagles have, people forget quickly. They have tried to fix this position with significant draft choices, and they haven't been able to fix it. And they kind of carpet bombed it last year with Jalen Reagor, starting with Jalen Reagor in the first round, but also later in the draft with John Hightower and Quez Watkins. You go back the season before, it's J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. They haven't developed any of these guys. It's funny because you hear all the criticism. You should have taken DK Metcalf instead of J.J. You should have taken Justin Jefferson instead of Jalen Reagor. And I think too many people assume that they're going to have the same success in their cities as if they were here. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I think the world doesn't stop once you draft a guy. In other words, you still got to develop him. You still got to get him in an offense that takes advantage of what he does well. So I think that's the biggest thing that often fans don't understand, to be honest. And the Eagles have not done a good job with receivers, and I think that's pretty evident. I don't know how you can look at it any other way.
So Deshaun Jackson is out. Alshon is out. What's left at wide receiver right now for the Eagles as it stands today?
Well, it's not good. If you look at 11 personnel, if they had to play a game today, and luckily they don't, it would basically be Jalen Reagor, Travis Fulgham, and Greg Ward.
Wow.
And that's one of the reasons they're a 4-win team. Because that's basically what it was last season, because Deshaun Jackson missed most of the season again with injury, and Alshon Jeffrey missed most of the season, came back late, wasn't himself. So it was basically those three guys last year with a little John Hightower thrown in, a little bit of Wes Watkins thrown in, and that's just not good enough. That's not good enough, and that's why people are looking at number 6 overall and saying you have to take a wide receiver. I don't think that's necessarily true, but, it's hard to say, oh, okay, wait, because there's a lot of good receivers in this draft as well as there were last season, and say you could get one at 37, and you can get one at 37. There's no question about that, but I do understand why people would not trust this organization because of their recent issues drafting at that position.
I'll throw this out there. How are you going to be able to properly evaluate what you have at quarterback if that quarterback has no one to throw the ball to?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a chicken and an egg. The great quarterbacks, and we talk about it all the time, they elevate the talent around them. And you see it, Aaron Rodgers would be the most notable. At times, he's frustrated because he knows he doesn't have top-tier receivers outside Devontae Adams. But I'll tell you what, the other guys make plays at times at least because he elevates them. And it's been that way for years. It wasn't that way last season, certainly for the Eagles, and at times you've seen it, but not in recent history. If you think about the modern NFL and all the numbers, 4,000 passing yards, it's basically, it used to be such a big thing for a quarterback. Now it's not easy, but it's not hard. I'll say that. And you see the explosive numbers from the receivers in this league. It's a passing league. And the Eagles haven't had a wide receiver with over 600 yards in 2 consecutive seasons. That's amazing in this era. It's like 1950s numbers. And they can't get anybody. They can't get the football to anybody.
No, it's been a disaster. John, I can argue, and I know you can too. We both can argue the wide receiver position has been more of a disaster and a failure than the quarterback position has, and we all know what just went down with Carson Wentz.
Yeah, it has. I think you can make a very strong argument that for 2 consecutive seasons, the Eagles are in the conversation, certainly, and they might be the winner of the worst wide receiving corps in the entire NFL. Yeah. There's no other way to look at it. And they put too many eggs in their basket when it came to Deshaun Jackson, who when he was out there, the rare times made plays. There's the one guy who made plays. You got to go back to week 1. Of the 2019 season, and he had the 2 long touchdowns from Carson Wentz. And I think it was his last game as an Eagle, he had I think it was an 81-yard touchdown from Jalen Hurts. There's a guy who could still make plays, still run routes, but he's never on the field. Never on the field. He played, I think, 8 games, so 8 out of a potential 32. And really, the vast majority of those 8 games, he was in and out for injuries. Those weren't 8 full games. So, he's 33 years old, and they trusted him to stay healthy. Not only 1 year, it's the old adage, "Fool me once." The Eagles got fooled twice. Shame on them.
So what are their options if they don't get a wide receiver at number 6? And let's take out the draft altogether, because I know we can talk about options strategically later in the draft. But what are the options and what's legitimately available outside of the draft pool?
not much. I mean, we've talked. The Eagles aren't going to be big players in free agency. I mean, it's just not possible because of all the salary cap issues that we've talked about. They're going to pay a quarterback $33.8 million to not play for them, and the salary cap is going to be anywhere from 180 to 185 million. So you're cutting off $34 million essentially from that right off the top that you can't use. It's dead money. But even beyond that, I mean, look, everyone speculates that Terrell Williams just got cut, and he's coming off an injury, a labrum injury. So one, you have to talk about health. Two, you have to talk about if he is healthy. That's kind of a proven guy, not a great receiver, but he was once a 1,000-yard receiver when Shane Steichen was with the Chargers and Nick Sirianni was with the Chargers. So they know him. They know him well. He's 6'4". They certainly need that type of physical presence. But if he's healthy and he's proven healthy, you would think one of the other 31 teams might think he's worth some money. So that's the problem the Eagles are in the fact that not only do they have to find a good, impactful player, they have to find a good, impactful player that's cheap. And how is that going to happen? I mean, we just talked, Ryan, about the injuries and about them getting burnt by Deshaun Jackson and to a certain degree Alshon Jeffrey with injuries as well as an older player. They're not going to be really, I think, keen on bringing in a player with injury history. So they almost have to look through the draft again. And that's not just receiver. That's basically everywhere on this roster to build up. They got to do it through the draft now, at least for a year or two.
And we're always going to end up going back to Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie as the root of the issue here, because in my mind, you have this entire new coaching staff led by, most importantly, a new head coach. Sirianni, I'm sure, is already starting to look at hours of game film from last year and whenever, wherever. So he should be making a decision of, you know what, I see enough, I saw enough that I want to give Jalen Hurts a full swing at this. So let's go get a franchise-changing wide receiver at number 6. But I think me and you both know it's not going to be possible for it to go down like that.
Well, I do think it's possible, but I don't think it's likely, just knowing how this team does business and how they've done business over the years. And remember, Nick Sirianni is an ex-receiver. He played wide receiver in college, granted, at a much lower level in Mountain Union, but he knows the position. He's coached the position before he became a coordinator. Kind of jockeyed back and forth from quarterbacks and receivers. So he knows quite a bit about the position. So hopefully the developmental aspect picks up a little bit from that standpoint. And look, you have guys on this roster with talent. We talked about, you can't write off Jalen Reagor. I don't even think, and people aren't going to want to hear this, I don't even think you can write off J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. I think you have to give him one more opportunity.
Oh, no, John.
With his new coaching staff. I do. And if you think about late in the season, you saw a little spark.
Ugh.
It was very little, but a little spark from J.J. with Jalen Hurts out there. And, it's interesting, Frank Reich, we talked about yesterday on the show, was talking in Indianapolis, and he was talking about the confidence of players and even the greatest players. And obviously it was in reference to Carson Wentz, but it also holds true for a player like J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, who had no confidence and was buried by this previous coaching staff. Well, now he's got new eyes on him. And he did show a flicker of something late last season with Jalen Hurts as the quarterback. So, I mean, you have to give him one more opportunity because you have to. You have no other options. There aren't a ton of things you can do here. So you say, okay, you know, Travis Fulgham is the same type of receiver from a frame standpoint. They're both bigger guys. They're both, you know, back shoulder guys in theory. You let them compete and see what happens in training camp. And you're going to need a big improvement from Jalen Reagor, and you're going to need another wide receiver in this draft. And now it could be as high as 6 overall. I don't think there's any way they're getting Jamar Chase. Anyway, he lasts the 6. But if they like Devontae Smith, you know, Jalen Waddle is probably – it's interesting because one guy's the Heisman Trophy winner, but the other guy who got hurt is more – you know, most NFL scouts think he's got the better opportunity, higher ceiling as a player. So there's plenty of options at the top of the draft. There's plenty of options at 37. I think Kadarius Toney's going to drop. I mentioned that when I did my mock draft. Rashad Bateman, a lot of receivers just like last year, but they got to develop these guys. And it starts with the guys they already have.
You know what? I said, oh no, when you brought up J-Jaw, Arcega-Whiteside. But listen, I don't disagree with you there, but I don't think they need to be banking on that. Like, they should still be approaching the offseason, the draft, free agency, whatever it is, with the thought in mind, we need to figure out this wide receiver position. And if you want to, give him work, him being J-Jaw, fine. But I don't want them to go into it like, you know what? Let's take a full another, attempt at this, giving him a shot to flourish without a backup plan or a plan in front of him.
No, I certainly don't think you can count on it. I don't think you can sit here and say, okay, it's going to be Reagor, it's going to be J.J., and it's going to be Greg Ward. I mean, that would be a disaster. You have to bring in competition. You have to create competition, and hopefully those guys win the jobs and prove themselves. I just mean you can't just dismiss a first-round pick and a second-round pick. I mean, for people that criticize the Eagles, and they took Reagor too early. I mean, I talked to enough people. Most teams in this league had him as a second-round pick, but a high second-round pick. Somebody who would have went from 30 to 40, somewhere in that range. Maybe the end of the first round, maybe the beginning of the second round. And the Eagles probably jumped the gun a little bit. In JJ's case, look, I mean, people kill him for that. It wasn't like they were the only team, and everybody else had him as a fifth, sixth-round pick, and they inexplicably took him in the second round. He was a really good player at Stanford. That was right where he was supposed to go. And if they didn't take him, he would have been taken shortly thereafter. And that's where I'm saying people assume that just made a mistake or, the Vikings hit on Jefferson and the Seahawks hit on Metcalf. It's about more than that, man. It's not just they're ready to play. It's coaching, it's the offense, it's the scheme, it's the guy throwing them the football. It's all of that. And the Eagles haven't had a lot of luck developing receivers. And you could point to that as a bigger problem. And I said that's when we talked about the coaching staff and about the changes there. And, I did not advocate firing Doug Peterson. I would not have done that, and I continue to say that. But I did say, and I've said pretty consistently, the biggest criticism, everybody talks about play calling, that's all nonsense. The biggest criticism you could throw at that coaching staff is the way they develop players. That is legitimate, and you can question that because there wasn't a lot of success there over the past couple seasons. Now, they also didn't have a lot of swings at it, so to speak, because of the lack of draft picks. These other teams are bringing in bodies and bodies and bodies, and they have more swings at the plate, so to speak. But when you talk about first and second round picks, those are the premium picks, and those are the picks you have to hit on. You have to get at least contributors. And to this point, JJ hasn't contributed at all, and Jalen Reagor was just, part was injuries, part was a very raw player, still learning. But it's just not good enough. The return on investment was just not good enough.
You did a mock draft a couple days ago, available on SI.com. Excellent. And for the people like myself who are going to be, facing palms if the Eagles don't get a wide receiver at number 6, calm us down with, and this is really hard to predict, but who's the DK Metcalf of this draft, like later, day 2, round 3? Who's someone with a lot of potential upside that could not fall through the cracks, but maybe be overlooked, or he's not in that top elite group that could pan out to be someone legit?
Well, I'm a big Rashad Bateman guy. I think he's a really good receiver. When you look at the guys who are going to go in the first round, and I mentioned the 3 top receivers, and that's, Jamar Chase is probably going to go top 5, I think, ultimately, unless the Dolphins want to pull the plug on Tua this early, which would be kind of an embarrassment for the franchise. I think he's going to go before the Eagles. So then you have to talk about the 2 Alabama guys. And I don't necessarily, there's questions because let's be honest. I mean, Devontae Smith is was so explosive at Alabama, but he is really small, man, and really slight. Not, you talk about Boston Scott. I always like to say Darren Sproles as running backs. They're not small. They're short. They're really put together, really powerful. Devontae Smith, you look at his lower body and you just say, wow, it just gives you some cause. Yeah. And ultimately, I think it's right to do that. Now, people point to Deshaun Jackson and say, look at Deshaun, but also look at where Deshaun was drafted. That's a second-round pick. That's not a first-round pick. That's not a top 10 pick. So he certainly was worthy. If you look at his career and what he was able to accomplish, he certainly was worthy of being a top 10 pick. But he wasn't for obvious reasons, and a lot of it had to do with size. And you're going to hear the same things with Smith, but he's going to go high, and then you have Waddle, and most NFL scouts think he's better. And he got hurt, and, he probably has a higher ceiling. So you start talking about, those are the guys you're talking about in the range of 6, and if you start going down to 37, guys like Tony, I think he's going to fall a little bit. Most people have him rated as a first-round pick, but he's a really raw route runner. And then I think a guy like Bateman is a more well-rounded receiver, can do more different things. And I look at what do the Eagles need. They probably need the well-rounded guy, considering what Jalen Reagor is, considering Greg Ward is pretty much just a slot guy, and considering JJ and Travis Fulgham are more of those Alshon Jeffrey big receiver types that can't run. And then you got the Quez Watkins of the world and John Hightower's, when basically all they can do is run. So they need a wide receiver 1, where everybody else can play off him, and then it makes everybody else better. Because Jalen Reagor's not that guy. He is not that guy. And they got to find that guy. And it's easier said than done.
Certainly is. We're talking with John McMullen, our NFL Eagles insider. We do this every weeknight, Monday to Friday on The Fix at 7:30 with John. Be sure to follow John at JF McMullen. PhillyVoice.com, SI.com is where you can find all of John's written work. And John, we're reunited again tomorrow on Extending the Play. So fill the listeners in on what's going to be happening with you and me tomorrow, 10 a.m.
Yeah, more obviously the most in-depth Eagles talk, and that's what everybody's looking for. But I also want to get into what we've been talking about earlier in the week, but not so much, and more of an NFL tint in what's going on with Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, and how that's going to have an impact on the Eagles, because it's going to have an impact on the top of the draft. Whether you're talking about specifically the New York Jets, the Carolina Panthers, who are just behind the Eagles, but may have to jump up in front of them to get a quarterback in the draft, or they can get one of these guys. Can they pry Deshaun Watson out of Houston? Can they pry Russell Wilson out of Seattle? But also, we're going to get into that, and we're going to get into the thought process. I think, let's be honest. Most fan bases are very provincial, and I think Carson Wentz took a lot of hits for the way he acted in this off season, and I think he's acting like everybody else is acting. And I wrote about that on Philly Voice, and I want to talk about it. What is the difference between the way Carson Wentz acted and the difference between Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady last year? What the only difference, Ryan? We'll get into this more tomorrow, but the only difference is those guys performed. Carson didn't.
Looking forward to it. Make sure you tune in tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. John McMullen is the host of Extending the Play. I will be in studio as well with John. You're not going to want to miss it. And John and I will be back doing this on The Fix Monday at 7:30. All right, John, I'll catch up with you in the morning, man.
All right, thanks, Ryan.
Yep, thank you. There he is, Johnny Mac. J Mac bringing the knowledge as always. I thought that was good conversation. Talking wide receiver because, man, Mel Kiper had his most recent mock draft. He had the Eagles taking Jamar Chase, and he said, this is what he had to say just real quick before we get to the top of the hour break. Drafting Chase will allow a better evaluation of Hurts in 2021. And I said the same thing. I agree. He's a true number one wideout with a high ceiling. My feeling is that he has earned a chance to start in week 1 next season. That's Jalen Hurts, Mel Kiper explains, and try to be Philly's long-term answer. Even though he completed just 52% of his passes, the Eagles have major salary cap issues, and this is not going to be a one-year rebuild for new coach Nick Sirianni. I wouldn't be surprised if they're picking in the top 10 next year as well, end quote from Mel Kiper. So listen, John talks about all of the swing and misses for the Philadelphia Eagles in the draft. Well, it's like, all right, fine. Now's your chance, man. Now's your chance. Go get one at number 6. 1 hour down, much more still ahead on The Fix. Taking a quick break.
The middle.
I'm out on fishing in areas like...
Come on, bro. You're about to have a kid, and he's going to want to go fishing. Uncle B can't take him fishing all the time. You got to learn to fish, bro.
It's a good point.
What do you mean it's a good point? My ability to father my child relies solely on taking him fishing?
Yes, Mr. Predicto.
All right, what's the question for Mr. Predicto here?
About your ability to father a child.
Well, it has to be yes or no, okay?
Will your son want to go fishing?
Well, my son, my boy, want to fish.
Uh-oh.
The signs say no.
Huh?
Oh!
That's it. I'm walking off the set like Maury. Boom, boom. I'm out.
Drop the mic.
See ya.
You're not capable of dropping the mic.
Oh, my goodness.
I'll roll with that Mr. Predict. This is my guy right here.
The Middle with Eitan Shander, Barrett Brooks, and Harry Mays. Weekdays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern.